it's not you. It's not you. That's really the important part. And I know how frustrating it can be because I know that what really you put up with day after day. I've coached in my years of now coaching, I've coached over 1,000 people worldwide. I will tell you that the things that we deal with here, the calls not being returned, the big black holes, the networking meetings and they're not yielding leads, the recruiters never reaching back, the preparing for hours for an interview, and then you runner up and you get zero or only useless feedback. And then you finally land, and after your manager resigns and acquisition is announced or something else happens and you're disrupted again. I will tell you on that last bullet point, I see that so vivid. I see all of this vividly, but especially that last bullet in my 12-month coaching program, because people get all excited. They run in, we start getting them bulletproof, which is what the purpose of it is. And I've had 2 people in the last year get hired. They love the manager. They can't wait to start. And by the time they start, their manager that hired them is gone. I've literally inside the membership created a series of questions to ask to try to flesh out how committed the person is that you're going to report to. I was a psychology major, so I just say have a few questions to make them sweat a little in case they're already got one foot out the door and they have any conscience at all. So all of these things are happening and more. I could do 3 slides of what you're experiencing. I'm going to explain some of them today as we look at a lot of this has to do with the fact that the rules have changed. But in general, I'm sure that all of you have experienced some form of this or another, right? And it's hard to know what the rules are, especially because not every search is alike. Even if there's going for the same position, for the same, in the same industry, the same role, it's really important to know that, and this is something I stress in my book and I just stress in general, everybody's search is different. The history of your career, the exact things that you were involved in your career, everything is different. And I sometimes see people networking with each other and they say, well, you should just do this and you should just do that. And you have to step back and hopefully you'll get some coaching today that will help you understand, but take it with a grain of salt because no 2 searches really are exactly alike. And all I can tell you is that after 2 decades as a recruiter and coaching so many people, I have some insights that I think will help. So I'm going to share with you some of the important rules of the game. So companies are doubling down on avoiding risk rather than seizing opportunity. And that makes transferable skills unattractive. Let me really unpack that for you. I have never seen such risk avoidance as I have seen in the last couple of years. You know, COVID really, we were coming out of risk aversion just before COVID because it was deep risk aversion during the recession. Then everybody's getting a little optimistic. 2019, 2020 went into the roaring 20s, and then boom, COVID hit. And I think it's almost that it was so disruptive and so confusing. Companies went back into the dark and said, no, we can't afford risk. And then, of course, there's a lot of things that come out on Wall Street on a daily, weekly basis from people's mouths that scare people. And in general, what does risk avoidance look like? It looks like if you have found that you came in second, you thought you were really strong, and the only thing you were missing was you had 3 years experience in that industry, and you thought that was plenty. They will sit down and say, well, this person has everything that we need in 3 years, and this person has everything that we need in 5 years experience. Let's not risk that they learned everything they needed to learn in 3 years. Let's get the high price spread over here with 5 years experience. It is that insane. The granularity with which they parse a candidate and say it has to have every single thing. So before it was, 7 out of 10, and you could have some wiggle room. It is getting worse and worse and worse. I see it when I am with a lot of my coaching clients that go in, and if they're not right in that sweet spot. So that's a lot of what's happening for you. And as a finance executive, it's logical, by the way, that finance, IT, HR, you should be able to have more flexibility between industry. I mean, the books are the books, the finance is the finance. There are some areas, for example, if you don't have software experience, and there's some intricacies about software finance and licensing and all of that. Or if you have only done finance in companies that are manufacturing and not in services or vice versa, there's some differences in there. Not hard to overcome, but there are differences. And even before the deep risk aversion, that was sort of a preference for somebody. But now it's a non-starter if you're not exactly in that hole. I would say 99% of the time, maybe 95 in certain geographies where they don't have as many people, but it is just amazing. And this is an important fact to know as we continue talking. And therefore, when you go in and you think you're close, but you're not from that industry, and some other things that I'll share with you that make it a risk as we continue on. And so you try to sell, but it's all transferable. Don't you see how this applies to that? Because of their avoidance of risk, they don't actually listen much to the argument of transferable skills. So what are the risk factors to them? These are them. The size of your prior company. So if you are coming from a big company to and interviewing with a small, or a small to a big, those are seen as a risk factor because they figure that if you come from a big company, you had a lot of resources. If you come from a small company, you don't understand the complexities, I'll call them complexities, of large companies and all that goes on in a matrix organization and all of what goes on there. Neither one of those are the fact. I certainly can tell you that people from large companies probably often have less resources than people in smaller companies who can say, hey, I need this. In the larger companies, there's no voice for that much to speak of, but that's the fact. The number of direct reports you have, or that's another way for me to say sort of span of control, right? So if you had 10 people, and now this is going to be 30 people, it's like, wow, that's triple what they had. That's a big risk. That's exactly the way that they're thinking, right? So anything that changes the scope of the role dramatically from what you had is a risk for them. In privately held versus or closely held, which a little bit different. So I think of closely held as family-owned businesses, and then privately held is it might not be family owned, but it's private held. It's not a public company. And then those are PE backed. Anybody on here who's ever worked with a private equity backed company, good for you, and you survived, so good for you. But the issue is that when they're looking for somebody who's the first time that you would be working for a private equity backed company, I actually had private equity partner when I was still doing search, and he said, I need somebody it has to be somebody who worked in a private equity backed company. And I said, what, why is that? He said, because we're real jerks and they need to know that. And if they've worked with anybody, they know how difficult we can be and how rigorous it is. So we want them to really have that clear picture. And so that is there's other factors, but that was an interesting comment, right? So privately, if you worked in a private company, now I can tell you, I did many finance, VP controller, and CFO searches when I was in my search practice for 2 decades. And even then, the criteria was right up front. If it was a public company, which I did very little bit of work. I did one public company search because I didn't like working with them. They only wanted somebody from a public company, and there's a lot to be understood for that, working with the analysts in the street, et cetera. So if they're privately held and closely held, they look for that. Family-owned businesses love finance executives who have been in family-owned businesses because they know that they're a little persnickety too, and that the books have been run mostly by somebody in the family, and there might be some things to clean up. So I did almost 14, 15 years of search, mostly for family-owned businesses. So those were the conversations we had. They look for people with M&A experience because they know that there's so much of that going on, and most companies have they're either wanting to position themselves to be sold, or they want to acquire something and they need that. They're asking, is this person have technology savvy? Are they technology savvy? I think what you're going to heads up, I don't have this on any slide, but I will tell you, you can't go anywhere without hearing the 2 initials AI. And a lot of the application for AI is in the back office in finance. If you haven't, gosh, I didn't put it in there, but I can add it, Joyce, in the Dropbox. There's a phenomenal 967-page report that came out of South by Southwest, and it's 2024 technology forecast. It is phenomenal. It's very easy to navigate, even though it's 900 and something pages. And it has a whole section on AI and how AI is impacting fintech and insurance, and takes every industry and it breaks it down for you. So companies are saying, that you're going to find out starting in interviews, because CEOs are very curious about this, many of you probably lived through Y2K, and you know that they were talking to everybody and trying to get all the information they could. They were so nervous about what was going to happen. The same is going on now with AI. And you'll probably find that coming up in interview questions. So if you haven't done your research on AI and its impact on finance and finance role, and particularly whatever industry you kind of are aiming for, it would be a really good thing to get up to speed on. But companies more and more are looking for that modern finance executive that understands all of the tools that helps things close better, close faster with less people. So that's always been the goal, right? And then stepping back or stepping up. And I think this is the most confusing when I debrief with clients or potential clients or members in the membership. It would seem that if you just say, look, I'm done with the CFO responsibilities, I'm done with I don't want to be this role or that role, I'm willing to take a step back and just kind of have a less rigorous role. That's fine for me. That's the right amount of money. I'm looking for the insurance and all of that, right? And you think what a great deal for them. They're going to get overqualified and I'm a good worker and I'm going to take a step back. Or look, I'm ready for that step up. So I've been a VP finance. I've worked under this. You have a CFO role. I'm ready for that role. That's the stepping up. Both of those are considered huge risks. The crazy thing about the stepping back is that they figure, well, the other thing that kind of goes along with this factor about risk aversion is that they are interviewing you rigorously to find out how you don't fit instead of interviewing rigorously to find out how you do fit. And many of you have probably experienced that. If you haven't, you will, or maybe you didn't recognize it vividly. I did as a recruiter. Because I would debrief with my clients afterwards and they would be saying, well, they didn't have this and they didn't have that. And I go, you didn't ask for that. This is what you asked for. Well, I know, but they don't have that. I go, I know, because you didn't ask for it, but let's talk about what they do have that you wanted. Oh, well, I didn't ask them about that. And I didn't, and it's like crazy. They didn't realize that subconsciously or consciously, they were looking for a reason to rule somebody out, because that's what fear when you're risk averse does. Like, let's get all the danger off the table, right? So again, if you have been interviewing and not being successful and thinking, but I'm willing to take that smaller role, that smaller scope or smaller company and all those things, and sort of step back, it makes them nervous. One of the things they're nervous about is that you won't stay. Now, ironically, they're only keeping people 2 to 4 years anyways, but they get into this, but they'll leave me and I'll be left in the lurch if something better comes along. So recognize that these are risk factors to them, right? The rules of the game are there is a stronger than ever preference for promoting from within. And back there where I said you go to an interview and then you either hear nothing or they don't really give you an explanation. A big part of that is because they have already had an inside candidate, and they are at all costs, they are trying to promote from within. Several reasons for the increase in that. It's less risk for them. They may not know exactly how you're going to perform in this new role, but they know you fit the culture. They know that you know the people in the culture. They know you understand the way work gets done in that company. And so you're much less of a risk than bringing in a stranger from the outside. So that's been a strong preference. In addition, they have a lot of young people in those companies now that are looking for proof that this is going to be a company that's going to give them the opportunity to be promoted. They have ambitious young people. So they are trying to retain their people and keep some of the promises they make all over their website in their careers page by giving promotions from inside. So that's coming up an awful lot. So it happens obviously at the more senior position that you are shooting for, the more likely that there's going to be inside candidates for that, especially in a large company, right? Oops. There you go. I believe in that so much, I'm going to tell you twice. The rules of the game today is your boss is no longer a career strategy. And I'm writing a blog post on this, but I know that in the years past, I cannot tell you how many people I have coached, and they do this elaborate career story that I have them do. And I say, how did you get this job? And they say, my boss moved there and I followed them. And then same boss, they took me over there. And then this was a different boss. And then they took me here. That happened. But right now, those bosses have been disrupted. Many got disrupted enough to say, I'm done. They've checked out a little bit earlier than they might have. And they're just not, that is not going to be the strategy. You need a strong network, but the idea that consistently, I mean, for people who had 20 or 25-year virtually, consistent career, it was amazing how many said, yeah, I mean, until this time, I always was taken in by a boss from someplace else, but it stopped, and I can't, it's not going to resurrect itself. So remember that, right? The interview process takes longer and involves more people because it's risky, and nobody wants to be the one who made the mistake. And so they have more people get involved. That's why you will see, I just talked to somebody who said I had 7 interviews before I talked to the hiring manager. And then I finally got to talk to the hiring manager. And then it was a committee decision afterwards, so that everybody got a vote and nobody had to say that person made the mistake if it doesn't work out. It's all risk, 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 right? So, and because it's so many people, it just takes longer. And they're really hesitant to actually, everybody's a little bit nervous about the decision, right? Um, I'm sorry. I've got so many things I wanted to tell you twice today. Sorry about that. So clarity is critical. And we're going to talk next about some of the strategy that I want you to be thinking about, knowing all this, because there's no good for me to just say, hey, all of this is out here. Good luck. I'll come back next time and see how you're doing. So I'm going to give you some solutions to this. But it is going to be critical that you have real strong clarity, mostly understanding the risk aversion is going to be your big game changer to really understand, that's why I can't talk myself into this particular role. Having a strategy is critical, and I'll explain to you what kind of a strategy is the best buffer for this. But your mindset is the biggest factor. I can tell you that because of the rules changing, because it doesn't even make logical sense when you apply and it all looks the same, and all those things I had on the first slide, it makes no sense. Your mindset takes a hit almost every single day. And I think that there is a lot of expectation that, well, yeah, I know it does, but I listened to this particular video and I think I'm all set now. This is a daily thing that you have to do. And I'm telling you that more people take longer to land and have a harder time getting the role that they want because of their mindset than ever had that happen because of their resume or because of their LinkedIn or because of other factors. This is where it all begins, because you don't interview as powerfully. You're not as confident when you're even networking. There's nothing that you have to do in order to land and keep a job that your mindset doesn't play the biggest role in that, right? So I do have here a link when you get the slides. We do, this is so important that every single Monday, I have a Monday morning mindset video that we play that's available for the members of the membership. And I just gave you a gift of one of those here for you to listen to, just to get the sense of it, right? So what can you do about it? Well, first thing you have to do, you can't create a strategy until you understand and have truly identified and defined both your emotional and your financial runway. Of all the people that I've coached, I don't think anybody that I've coached ran out of a financial runway before they ran out of an emotional runway. But the emotional runway gets hit over and over and over again, and it runs out faster. So you all, in this group, I know you must understand the financial runway. What's your cash flow? What do you have to have at the beginning of the month to come out not to come out in the black at the end of the month? You look at your savings, you look at all the things that you can liquidate, you look what you have, and you say, I have this length of a runway to find this job. The emotional runway is a little bit different. And it's not that you won't ever have a bad day or a good day. And just because you have a bad day doesn't mean you have a very short emotional runway. You do for that day, but not over time, but not defined the way I'm going to show you or tell you. But the emotional runway is that pretty consistently, it's hard for you to get yourself up. There's more times that you're feeling hopeless. There's more times that you're realizing that your confidence has been beaten up. There's more times that you feel low than high on a consistent basis. And it's really holding you back. And you know that no matter whether you're prepping for the interview of your life, you want to leave it all in the field, it's hard to do so. So it's the first thing, because the strategy that you're going to deploy in plan A, plan B, and plan C is going to depend upon that emotional and that financial runway. And it is perfectly fine to realize that sometimes, many times, I have coached people, I'm very pragmatic, to say, if your emotional runway keeps on running low, it's just going to take you longer and longer and longer, and that's not going to make it any better. Let's take a safe haven. Let's get something for now, and then everything will start to lift up from there, and then we can go and do the bulletproofing activities of finding you the very perfect right thing. Because once you've landed again, you become a more attractive candidate. All kinds of things happen that weren't happening before. People will take your calls, all kinds of things. Recruiters, etc., will be more interested in you. But first, you have to decide your emotional and financial runway. Then you have to figure out how you are where you are the lowest risk option and can be the top candidate. Now, what do I mean by that? When you go through all those things that I said were risk aversion, if you are looking at an opportunity and you are spot on, you're from that industry, the right size team, public, private, all of those, and you have all of that, plus, any of the must-haves that they have, but you're not sitting there going, well, no, maybe not that, but that's okay. If you want to define yourself as the top candidate, you have to pretty much look at a job description and say, I, as a candidate, would take all of the risks that I can see off of the table, right? There may be some things you don't know until you start to interview, but on the surface, right? How do you do that? I really encourage you to put some time on your calendar, which is the only way anything gets done. Put some time on your calendar. And it doesn't have to be more than about an hour. Most people are able to get this done in about an hour. Go out and look at job descriptions anywhere. It doesn't matter what geography, because it's not like you're applying for them. Just look at posted roles to see this role. I love that's the exact title I'm looking for, and get those job descriptions that are right from your industry. Pull a few down, because I've had some people say, well, I pulled down 10, which is what I like to see you do, 8 to 10 of them. And, on some of them that I really loved them. That's exactly what I wanted to do. But you were right. I only matched 6 out of 10 of what they were looking for. And on these over here, I matched 10 out of 10. Does that mean that you never look at the 6 out of 10? No. But if you have a short emotional or a short financial runway, or both, you don't want to be putting your eggs into the long shot opportunity. You want to put yourself, it's picking the better shot in terms of, you're going to go get the stock that's going to be more guaranteed, not the high risk stock. So you're going to say, okay, now I understand I can be the top candidate here. And that's your plan A, regardless of where the length of those 2 runways. And I'll tell you how you adjust that strategy accordingly. Your plan B, so plan A is top candidate here. Plan B is, I can't be the top candidate, but this is aspirationally the industry I wanted to switch to, or I wanted to go from a big to a small company. There's some change in there that makes it more risky, but that's aspirationally something that you wanted. Plan C, I'm going to get back to in a minute. So now you've got, if you're in an active search, you've got plan A, top candidate, plan B. If your emotional runway and your financial runway are short, then you're going to put 75 to 80% of your hours of work in your search into your plan A, because that's going to be the sweet spot to get you landed soonest, because you're taking away the risk. And you're going to put another percentage into plan B, whatever's left, 15, 20, 25%. You may start and say, no, I've got a good runway. My emotions are fine. I'm going to go 50-50 or even 40% in plan A and 60% in the higher risk. That's going to be my approach. But as things change, as either runway starts to shrink, then you're going to want to adjust those percentages. Again, it's like a investment portfolio. So bonds or stocks, I'm going to adjust as the time goes on. Now, here's what I want you to understand, and this is where I see people get very frustrated, because it's part of the way things are done these days that they really were not aware of. So they said, I'm going to go, have this long runway, I'm going all in on plan B. I'm not going to put any time in plan A, going all in on plan B. And then if it doesn't work after 6, 9, 12 months, I'll drop back and I'll adjust to plan A. I think I've got enough runway on both ends. The problem is here, that when you do that, and you can tell, Plan B is very risky for you, the candidate, because plan B is very risky for the hiring company because you don't fit the top candidate, no risk profile. So now you spend 6, 9, 12 months going after the plan A and it's not working. And finally go, all right, this is my cutoff time. I'm giving up. I'm going back. Now you go back to the marketplace where you came from and you've added risk to yourself as a candidate, even in your top candidate sweet spot. Why is that? Because now they're sitting there going, been in transition for a long time. Well, and what are you going to say to them? Well, I didn't really want to work in this industry again. So I wasn't talking to anybody here, but here I am. I can't do anything else. So I'm back. You can't tell them what your strategy was. So what happens? Remember I said that they are trying to figure out why not to hire you. So they sit there and they go, well, I don't know. We must not see something that somebody else saw. You become higher risk because you've been sort of on the market too long and it makes them nervous. And you didn't have to be if you had had a better mix of always having some plan A, even if you're very optimistic about how, readily you can make the move into plan B. Now, I'm going to give you a caveat to changing how you look at those percentages. And that is, if you have a well-developed, activated network, a network that can be activated, or a network you have already activated, and it includes people in the category that you're looking at for plan B, so that you can get that warm introduction. A warm introduction from a network connection takes the risk level down for the employer many, many points down, because here's our own person that we know, they're attesting to the skill and the capabilities of this person. And that testimony takes it's almost being sanctioned by that person. That takes some of the fear away. So it makes it not as risky for them, right? So if you have a plan B and a great network around that portion, because maybe you have friends that have already moved into the area that you want to move into, then you need to be leveraging that network, because that's going to take some of the risk and it's going to give you more ability to move around in plan B. Okay. Now there's plan C. What is plan C? I have several people working in plan C right now. I have one that was working in it and he just landed exactly what he wanted in his where he wanted to be before he took it, but his emotional runway had completely run out. Not his financial runway. He had at least another 2 years. He had sold his house. His kids were out of college. It was that footloose, fancy free, not a lot of expenses. I can do this. But his emotional runway did not allow him to keep it up. He took a job and he was in it for almost 2 years. And from the day he started in that job, he was in my onboarding program. And I'm telling you this because y'all can do this for yourself. We started working on where he really had wanted to be. He was somebody who had been involved in sports events and sport promotion, excuse me, and he wanted to be working on the Olympic out in California, wanted to be working with the Olympic Committee. And he had done it before, earlier on in his career, but a while back. He just landed about 2 weeks ago, and he said, some of the relationships that I established in the first 90 days of when I landed in the first role, and I just kept nurturing them and getting a wider network and more testimony to my greatness. That's how I wound up, it was many, many rounds of interviewing, as you might imagine. That's how he wound up in his plan. So plan C was, I'm going to stop not the financial bleeding, but I'm going to stop the emotional bleeding that was going on. Got in a good job and it paid well, and it was all fine. It just wasn't the thing he wanted, but using the right strategies was able to position himself, and now he's right where he wanted to be. And in the meantime, his other job essentially paid for him to do all of that investigating of the other role, but he did his job. He gave them their money's worth, but it helped finance, right? You have to know what the market wants so that you can effectively prepare for the interview. And I know that seems like such an obvious thing, but it isn't always. What I'm trying to tell you there is it's not always what is on your on the job description. What you want to be able to use your behind the scenes folks, your network. Maybe it's an accountant that you worked with, a vendor for some software that you worked with that can help you understand what's really going on inside the company, so that you can really tailor your history, your stories, your explanations, and really give them a huge comfort feeling that this person is using some of the language that we're using internally. That's one of the big things that an insider can give you, especially if you're going to be interviewing with a CEO, because I think everybody could raise their hand here. I certainly can. I don't think I ever reported to a CEO who didn't have a particular bone that they gnawed on for the entire year. Like they would start off with the Monday kickoff or the January kickoff, and it's like, this is the year of this, and you didn't want to talk about anything else but that. And so when people would come to meet with him, I'm thinking, if they're not talking about that, he's not listening to them, right? And we all have had that. I remember it vividly. I was head of sales, so you can imagine how vivid it could be for me. And Carl Icahn was over the top running the whole show, so it was fascinating. But I knew what the language was, and I knew that there were other things I could talk about with the CEO, the president, or Carl Icahn, but there was only one thing that they wanted. So you really want to know that, because that takes the fear away, takes the risk away. As they're talking to you, it's like, wow, somebody sounds, they're using the same terminology that we have, and they understand this problem vividly. That's what we need, right? And then you need to know if recruiters should be part of your strategy. Why would a recruiter not be part of your strategy? For the most part, it is a part of strategy for most, virtually everyone, as long as you've got the right recruiters that work with financial executives at your level. Where it isn't is if you think, well, I'm going to work on plan A, and then I'm going to connect with recruiters there in my sweet spot where I'll be the top candidate. And then I want to go into this industry over here, so I'm going to connect with recruiters in that industry, and you waste any time or effort, because time is precious, doing that, you're in big trouble, because recruiters don't get hired. We got paid 5 and 6 figures. You probably saw the checks go out in your group, or saw them on the balance sheets, 5 and 6 figure checks to go find somebody, because there's risk aversion. In the old days, we would get paid that to go find somebody who would bring innovative new ideas and best practices from other industries. And now it's like, no, we just want somebody who's done it already, right? So those recruiters, if you're, going to from, not that insurance and finance, banking, for example, is not a big leap, but it could be for some in a risk aversion. Whatever the difference is, you don't try to aim for recruiters in the aspirational industry that you're looking at. Or, for example, private equity back, there are recruiters who specialize in private equity backed companies and work with private equity firms to find people. But if you don't have that experience, it's a real long shot. You probably will have your time wasted by being put into the mix, because recruiters have to have 5 to 7 potential candidates, so they have to make it look good. But it is not going to, probably you're just going to be sort of in there, but not going to be able to be the top candidate. The other time when recruiters are not a good strategy is if you have taken sabbatical or taken any time off, which a lot of people have had with between COVID and illness in families, et cetera, or any long breaks. And a long break is 2 years or more, and especially if you've done your own consulting gig for years, and now you decide, I'm done with that, I want to go back to corporate America. Recruiters are not able to do much for you in that, because it's not them, it's not, don't pick on the recruiters, it's just that they know that their clients are looking for somebody right in the sweet spot, and those are 2 risk factors that their clients are not willing to have them. They're not going to pay a recruiter to go find somebody. As one of my clients, when I first was getting, he said, we don't want any of these people who have been consulting or this. And I said, why is that? He said, if we wanted them, we could find them ourselves. We want somebody sitting in a company behind those doors. These are the doors we want you to go find them in, right? So you have to know that, right? So you must have clarity. The clarity has to come from what I've been describing for you right here. To get you from this kind of futility to opportunity, you have to have clarity, and it has to be having a strategy like I just explained. I can't tell you how important it is to get very rigorous and very, very focused on plan A, plan B, and if I run out, I'm going to grab plan C, and then keep working the system so that I can get to where I want to go from a position of power, as opposed to a position that just is not as powerful, right? You need to be able to clearly introduce yourself in a unique way and convey your unique value, because you have to empower people to help you. And if all they're doing going out is saying, I have this finance executive, or I know this person, and they're not getting more direct, in the beginning you said, I have all these conversations, I'm not getting any leads. It's because you don't have the clarity to introduce yourself powerfully, and that's what's slowing you down. This is a real important skill when we have this very limited, what we want to do is accelerate things, right? So you want to make every conversation be powerful, and you want to be referable. I am going to include a couple of handouts. One of them is a handout with it actually was a bonus inside the membership, but it's a step-by-step guide to having an effective, a powerful and effective networking meeting. And it'll be in the Dropbox with a second document, which is how to evaluate whether your network is actionable, because you need to have an actionable network, not just a database, but an actionable group of people that are ready, willing, and able to make introductions for you, right? And then you have to be able to make a clear and specific and actionable request when they ask, how can I help? I will tell you, I did some breakout rooms. I did a couple of keynote speeches end of last year and early this year. And then they had some breakout rooms, and I went in the breakout rooms with folks that were in transition. And I said, okay, well, here I am. How can I help you? And I didn't get a clear answer from anybody in the room. And when I went back around and said, what exactly are you looking for? And who should I introduce you to if I know somebody in my network? What is the right person? They couldn't tell me by title. They couldn't tell me by anything, right? So not having that clarity meant that was really a shame, because I was there to help them, but I couldn't get the right information from them to be actionable for them, even though I wanted to be. And people want to help people. So help them help you, right? The preparing for an interview so that you stand out and are memorable. Anybody who's been on my Zoom calls know that several years ago, it just occurred to me as I was preparing a presentation that I know that many of you, especially if you've been in any kind of outplacement, they always talk to you about preparing your star story. So this was the situation, this was what you did, and this was the result. And I looked at that, and having spent 3 decades in sales leadership, I said, isn't that interesting? Because when I trained my sales force, and they made a lot of sales and they did a great job, I trained them. I didn't have an acronym for it at the time, but I trained them in the reverse. I trained them in what I now call the RAPS formula, which is, here's the result I produced. Because when you start to tell the story, and when they say, have you ever done this? And tell me about a time. What happens is, especially when you're nervous in an interview, everybody's had this happen, where you start telling it and you realize you're telling details. Maybe they don't need to know that detail, but here it comes and you've already told it. And by the time you get to the result, they're ready to move on to the next question. Whereas if you start with the result and you give them, like at XYZ company, I was able to produce this. And then they go, that's amazing. And they're thinking to themselves, how did you do that? So the next thing is, this is the action I took. So the RATS goes backwards, and this is the situation. The last thing you tell them about was what the situation was, because they didn't really care. They wanted to know if it produced the results, right? And it's as simple as the situation was exactly as you've just described here, and now you know the results I get. So I want you to think about making sure that your story is memorable and starting with the results first, because everybody else keeps them on the edge of their seat going the other way around. And this, I can tell you, it will make you stand out, because as a recruiter, we were always there like, yeah, but what did you do with it, right? Powerfully convey relevant, memorable stories and convey your impact. Take the time ahead of time to make sure that your stories are vivid and relevant. I had a very tough client, and he was very rigorous with candidates. And he interviewed, it was a food manufacturing company. He was the chief operating officer, and he interviewed somebody for VP Ops, manufacturing operations. And he knew they were about to get acquired. Didn't tell anybody, but that was the thing. So he wanted a meticulous person. And he called me and he said, that was a great candidate. He's the real deal. I said, wow, coming from you, that's a miracle. How do you know he was the real deal? And he said, oh, the stories he told me, they were so vivid. He said, you couldn't make those up. You couldn't pretend that those were true. He could tell me everything every question I asked down to the detail, and he drew me in. You've got to make them vivid so that they're memorable. And the more vivid and memorable they are, because remember, that conversation was several years back, because I haven't been doing recruiting for quite a while now, but he was still a very risk averse COO, had a strong risk aversion in his background. And yet that's all he needed to feel safe. Well, that's what's going on now. When they're interviewing with you, they're thinking, what if they really did that? How do I know? How do I get, they don't know really how to screen enough to get all of their fears away. So this helps tremendously, right? So now I want to show you, because I'm going to give you the document that talks about how to have a good networking meeting. as an support to all of this, because it's one of those most important skills for you to develop. We have dedicated, I think, 17 video trainings and 13 specific lessons on this in the membership in the last few months rather. But this is, and I'm going to read this to you. This is an actual conversation. I used to do workshops here, live workshops every month in Atlanta. And the people would come in and mix and mingle, and I intentionally would kind of walk around the room and be listening in on the conversations, because I would use it for coaching as we started the workshop, right? And I had to go over to the podium and write this down after I heard it, because it was word for word, and I thought, I can't make this up, right? So here it was. I was in XYZ industry, and then I moved from there to a completely different industry and role. And for the last 5 years, I've been ABC industry in a new role in marketing. So I can really do anything, and I just want to work with great people. So I'm just looking for a role that will challenge me, one where I can use my skill set. The size of the company or industry doesn't matter. I'm really versatile. I think I'm of myself as a jack of all trades. The Swiss Army knife is the scariest thing to a company that is risk averse. They want the laser, they want that scalpel, right? So this kind of, and you probably have heard some version of this, and maybe for you with no training or coaching or understanding, especially if it's the first time around this rodeo, it may sound, well, that's really true. I just want to work for great people. People can't, it's not an actionable request to a referral source. It's not at all. It's like going onto a car lot and saying, I just need a car, gotta have, tires. That's it. She's got tires and a steering wheel. I think we're set. Well, how about this one? Well, I don't know. I don't really like that one. It's blue. Well, you didn't tell me the color. How about this one? Oh, that's red. You've got to be specific. So here's an example of a clear intro, and a memorable clear intro. Finance can strangle a business or help fuel its growth. As CFO for a PE-backed middle market manufacturing company, I now have told you exactly where I came from. I've been able to be the spark that ignites profitable growth. My motto has always been, let's see if we can find a way to make this work. And every member of my team thinks that way too. My success as a financial steward has come from that can-do attitude, and by forward-thinking strategies, active collaboration with stakeholders, embracing and driving innovation, and leveraging technology to address inevitable challenges and seize opportunities. If you are talking to somebody if you were talking to me, having been a head of sales and worked with many CFOs, and some of the CFOs that I work with said, let's see if I can find a way to stop you, instead of let's see if I can find a way to make this work. Surely I can make this deal go away for you. Just give me a minute and I'll ruin it for you. And then I've worked with others who said, we'll find a way to make this work, right? And I worked for some that they were oblivious to the fact that they could fuel growth. And I'm suggesting that you open with something like that as an opening statement, because people they think of the chief revenue officer as fueling growth. They think of the operations person as fueling growth. They don't think of the CFO as fueling growth, but the right CFO in the right position doing the right things absolutely can fuel growth, right? By not strangling it is one of the ways you can fuel it. So it's just a whole different approach. And I just wanted to show you something pretty vivid so that you could be thinking about that, because that's what's going to help you back here with being able to clearly introduce yourself and be very specific and point them. Because here's the thing, you don't really, for your sweet spot referral sources, you don't want to say, well, my plan A is this, and that's where we come from. Maybe we come from the payments industry, from the banking, some part of finance. Maybe we come from manufacturing industry, food manufacturing, which has its complexities. And then say to them, and I'm also looking for something in telecom, because I've really always wanted to be in telecom, or I'd love to be in a company that's doing SaaS for XYZ. You don't want to do that to your referral source. You want to give them one target. When you confuse, you lose. So you want to make it as clear as possible. And this kind of getting good at that is going to make that happen, right? So once you have clarity, you then can truly be your authentic self. So clarity on what the market wants, where you can be a top candidate, what your runways are, how you introduce yourself, the powerful stories that you need, and then consistently applying them. And when you have that, you can truly be your authentic self. And once you're your authentic self, the right opportunity will virtually find you. I have had, what was the last, it is Thursday. Yesterday in the membership, we had 3 people who had just landed. And in the other input, because anybody from the Zoom call who has landed is sending me notes, and really amazing the number of people in the last, we have averaged 22 people reporting that they've landed per week in the membership, in the Zoom call, because I always ask for that. I don't know that that's everybody on the Zoom call who's landed, because not everybody reports it to me, but I'm just saying the consistency has been on average 22 landings per week. This week, the last number I have, I'll be reporting it in less than an hour, just about an hour. I think we had 26 landings this week, which is higher than it's been for quite a while. It's a function of, I think it's a little bit of a function of people worried. They're so used to having the things frozen. They don't know what quarter the freeze is going to go on, but they know it's going to happen. So they're trying to get their team built. So I have some information to share on my membership, but I want to stop for time being, take some water, take a breath, and see if there's any questions. I know I have thrown a lot at you. Every single bullet point that I shared with you is another whole workshop in and of itself. So I appreciate that I'm putting a lot on you. I will tell you that the not as explicit in the plan A, plan B strategy outline, but for, I don't know what Amazon is charging these days. I think it's $7.99 for the Kindle. Jeff Bezos tells you what you can sell your books for most of the time if you're a self-publisher. But my book has a lot of the strategies here, and a little bit of the plan A, plan B, but I gave you a much more granular taste of that. But good to start with. This is something I thought might be helpful, and I have some other more specific answer to, but this is a document that I created. How to know if your network is actionable. This is what defines an actionable network. So I think this will be an important thing to have. But at the end of the day, it's going to have to happen one relationship at a time. I'm not trying to sell my book. I would bring you the chapter of it, but I didn't. I have my chapter 4 is all about networking, and it is the everything that I know about building a network. But the bottom line is you have to find the relationship. You have to make deposits in the relationship. It's sort of like a bank account. You got to make a deposit in that relationship before you make a withdrawal. And sometimes you have to make a deposit. And you know how when you deposit a check over a certain amount, the bank will make it clear before you can use the funds. That's why you have to think about relationships. So you make a deposit, and then it has to clear. And then the other piece of it that is so important is then having a system that you stay in touch with that person, because otherwise it's a hit and run, and it takes time for that trust to build. You can increase the speed of trust, and I've done actually did a workshop on here. It might be somewhere in the archives on networking in a way that works for you, because most people, if you don't want to, they try to network like a glad hander, and that's not the average person. 70% of the people are appalled by that. So not that. But the end of the day, having a system and nurturing that system over time is what makes it work. And it's really, but the thing that speeds up the trust is finding people with affinity points. So they come from the same background as you. They went to the same college as you. They worked in the same company as you worked at some point in time. Those affinity points, when you say, hey, you went to NYU, I went to NYU, then they already know something about you, because there's a culture to every university that you've ever been to. It's not like Georgia Tech, right? For sure. So that will speed it up. But I would say this, it's a whole nother, it's actually a 3-day workshop that I used to do in the past. It's that involved, but it's well worth learning. So really getting up to speed on that. Keith Ferrazzi, who's an author, Ferrazzi, has a couple of really good books on the topic. And then the How to Win Friends and Influence People is still a classic. It's from it's 80 years old, but it's the formula. So there's a lot out there. But you want to think about it intentionally. You want to have a system that allows you to stay in touch, and you want to nurture and develop it. And you can get leads sooner than later if you really intend to really work at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I'm just going to show you quickly. I'm not going to take you into the site. Was there another question? No. Okay. At the back end of this slide deck, I have a couple things for you to look at. This is a video that tells you exactly why I created the membership. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. I know that they say it's only business, but I know damn well it is not only business. It's you come into a company and it's all family. Oh, we have an onboarding and you're going to be part of our family. And then when you're going out the door, it's just business. And that's a really nice way for them to feel better about it. They felt better about that for 20,000 executives up in the Bay Area already this year. It's just business. It isn't. It's family, it's lives, it's dreams. It's not just business. And that's why I do what I do, because I want you to have an unfair advantage. So this will tell you why I created the membership. This is the current pricing for the membership. And this was I'm going to have to revise that because the bonus disappeared because the wait list is over. These are some testimonials from people who are in, and then I'll have to fix, well, that's funny. I have to fix this, but you can, if you click on here, it will take you to the full sales page and gives you everything that's involved in it. And if you reach out to me directly at bulletproofyourcareer.com, I can be happy to jump on a call and give you inside. There's also a sneak peek into here, and there's some people in your group who are on here today who are members, and I'm sure that they would be willing to tell you a little bit about it and maybe show you inside of it as well. But it is, the doors are only open now for the next week. We take registration. We take registration every time I believe that the current members are fully serviced, and we've got the next round of people to support me, so that then we grow to the next level. But rather than tell you a lot more about it, there's a sneak peek, and then there's a page rather than to take your time up here. But I'm more than happy to jump on a call and take you in and answer questions and show you through. Okay.